My friends, here's a story about interest eating all the things we're actually interested in. A quiet headline that was buried in all the loud ones last week. Washington just revised the deficit story upward again. And the part that's growing fastest is the part that nobody gets a vote on: interest on the debt. Once that line item starts winning, ideology and politics turn into interior decorating. On February 11th, the Congressional Budget Office updated its budget outlook, and it points to persistent near $2 trillion annual deficits and a rising path thereafter. More important than any single year is the direction of revision. This new outlook implies more borrowing over the next decade than the previous baselines predicted. Translation: the "it'll get better on its own" story keeps losing ground. Now, why does this matter? Every dollar of interest is a dollar that cannot be spent on something else. CBO's updated outlook projects net interest costs around $1 trillion in 2026, which is bigger than all we spend on national defense and all we spend on Medicare, rising to about $2 trillion by 2036. And by the middle of the next decade, interest will not just be a side dish, it will be the governing constraint on federal budgeting. And everything we want government to do in the future, whatever that is bidding against a bill from the past. So when deficits persist and debt rolls over at higher rates, the government becomes a refinancing machine. The politics will stay theatrical, but the balance sheet will take over the plot. And I want you to understand the genre of this statement, because in our dysfunctional information environment, this is going to feel like politics, but what it actually is mathematics, unyielding and devastating fact. Politics debates new promises because new promises still work rhetorically. They win primaries, they win elections, they still fundraise well. But arithmetic reallocates old commitments first. Here's what that looks like in practice. The big fights in politics are usually about discretionary choices and new initiatives. The real growth in the budget is mandatory commitments and interest costs. By 2031, analysts are calling for the rate of debt expansion to be greater than the rate of growth in the economy, which is the beginning of a debt spiral. In other words, we keep having debates about the pieces we can still move, while the pieces that we can't move are quietly taking up more and more of the chessboard. And this is why you get a surreal combination in politics, like record-ish deficits even outside of crisis conditions, and a political culture that still talks like it's shopping in a Target with unlimited shelf space. What I'm trying to help you do here, my friends, is to update your mental model of what's going on. When interest crowds out discretion, ideology becomes a competing set of luxury beliefs. Why? Because ideology depends on choice. It needs room to maneuver. It assumes that you can reallocate available resources to what you value. But if the budget is increasingly pre-committed, then the governing question goes from what do we value to what must we protect, even if we ruin ourselves to do it. And that's the moment where abstract debates give way to smaller, harsher, more violent fights. Programs stop competing on merit and they start competing on tribal in-group protection, which is existential at all times. And the system drifts towards the most politically painless financing mechanism available to pacify all the groups. Slow motion ruin for everybody. It won't likely be something as brutal as default. It'll usually be some mix of higher inflation tolerance, financial repression-like dynamics, stealth tax via bracket creep, and perpetual refinancing at whatever yield the markets demand, which increase recessionary pressures on the economy no matter what the Federal Reserve sets the rates at. In short, it's a world where those who come after us will inherit fewer choices because of the ones we take away from them. So if you want to understand what policy and politics are going to look like for the next 5 to 10 years, forget ideology, start with the interest line, because that's what's writing the list of what is possible in the future. Washington can argue about the future and about ideology and politics and all day long, but the bond market is going to collect for the past every single month. And when that collection starts to dominate, the country doesn't get more ideological, it gets more constrained. And so the existing ideologies become more existential, vocal, threatening, and violent. If you want to understand what's going on in the US right now, in our politics, watch what's growing without a vote. That's where the real government is. See you guys next time.